just brilliant. Oh, I absolutely love this car. Hey guys, welcome to my second drive of Honda's Civic Type R FL5, the new one. I went to the UK launch of this car back in January. In typical UK fashion, the weather was horrendous. I got to take it out on the road, almost got taken out by a tank. It's definitely worth watching that video if you haven't already. There will be a link up here somewhere and in the description below. And I got to take one out on track at Thruxton, but again, it was massively wet and there was a lot of standing water. I remember thinking at the end of that day, wow, this is a good car, but there's so much more to unlock and discover. And I think I even said in the video, let's hope I can get my hands on one when the weather is a little bit better. And today the weather is a little bit better. I will briefly talk about the cost of this car, but there's kind of no point because when this went on sale 6 months ago, well, all of the UK's allocations sold out pretty much overnight. Every Honda dealer in the UK was only allocated 2 or 3 units and they went to their favoured customers. But back then the retail price was £47,000. Yes, that's right, 47 grand for a Honda Civic. But if you had watched my first drive video and many other reviews on the internet, you'll know that it pretty much justifies that price. And if you did want to buy one today, there is quite a few on the used market. I say used, they're a couple of months old with delivery miles and they're all around 50 grand. So they've held their value very well, as you'd expect. So I guess today is more about, should you consider buying a used one for 50 grand instead of buying a new one, because we can't buy a new one, at least here in the UK. In terms of styling, well, I kind of sit on the fence with this. I've never been the biggest fan of aesthetics of the Type R in general, but I think this very latest FL5 is the best looking to date, especially around the front end. It's low and really, really wide. It looks like it means business. The back end, not so much. I'm not a fan of the wing and I'm not a fan of the triple exhaust, but as I say, as an overall package, I think it's the best looking Type R to date. Under the bonnet, we have a 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged engine. It's very similar to the unit that was in this car's predecessor, the FK8. But in this car, it produces 329 horsepower and 420 newton-meters of torque. That all goes through a manual 6-speed gearbox, which is the only option in the Civic Type R. And power and torque is fed to the ground via the front axle alone. Honda claim this will do the 0 to 60 sprint in just 5.4 seconds, which is impressive for a front-wheel drive hot hatch. Something that is more impressive to me is the claimed weight. Honda say this weighs just 1,430 kilos. That's nearly 200 kilos lighter than BMW's M135i. It's almost 300 kilos lighter than the brand new G87 M2. That's just bonkers because this isn't a small car. It's certainly no smaller than the M2. And I think the fact that Honda have managed to make it tip the scales at just over 1,400 kilos is massively impressive with all of today's restrictions, regulations, pedestrian safety, etc. So that sounds like a key ingredient for a fantastic and fun hot hatch. Before we jump in and have a look at the cabin, I wanted to show you this. Aside from the fairly impressive 410-litre boot, and obviously that's before you fold those rear seats down, well, I thought Honda UK had forgotten to supply me with a parcel shelf when they dropped this car off a few days ago. But I was wrong. Look at that for a simple yet effective solution. It's like a giant seatbelt, and I'm sure it's not unique to the Type R. I'm sure it's a Civic thing. Well done to Honda for coming up with a solution for something that can be an absolute pain. Jumping inside, the first thing that strikes you is these red bucket seats. They contrast pretty well, I guess, with the Boost blue pearl paintwork on the outside. It's a bit of a Superman spec car. The rear bench is black and fronts are red. I guess if you've got kids, babies, then that being black is probably a good thing, a bit more practical. In terms of the actual driving position, it's very, very good. I am sitting maybe a little bit too high, certainly not as low as I would be in the new M2, but for someone who has got a very lanky frame like me in a Japanese car, well, I feel very, very comfortable. These seats, well, we've talked about them being red, they are incredible. I mean, they really are incredible. I would say they're somewhere between, again, I'm going to talk BMW because a lot of you are familiar with BMWs too, I'm sure. They're somewhere between the M Sport seat that comes in the new M2, M3, M4 and the carbon bucket seat. They just sit perfectly in the middle. They're very supportive, they're very comfortable, but most importantly, and unlike the carbon buckets that are, say, in my car, they're very easy to get in and out of because these bottom side bolsters do flex and move around if you do catch your leg or your bum on them when you're getting in and out. The steering wheel is lovely and just to die for. I did talk about it in my first drive video. It has a lovely thin rim with loads of feel. Honda know what they're doing, just like Porsche with that. And it's just fantastic sitting here static. It's just a lovely thing to feel. There are lots of buttons going on that adjust things like cruise control, various menus, etc. Obviously stereo functions, but they're inbound from the rim and you don't foul them with your hands, even big clumsy hands like mine. In terms of the actual interior design, well, I actually really like it. Yes, there are some cheaper, nastier plastics once you get below the waistline, but in terms of the actual layout, I think it looks great. I love this continuous grille here with the vents that are almost integrated into it. Everything's very clear and easy to use. All the climate control, well, is manual controls, they're dials and buttons, which is great. This infotainment screen, not the biggest fan of. Kind of looks like it's almost an afterthought. And to me, at least, it feels like it is angled towards the passenger, so set up more for a left-hand drive car, but maybe I'm just imagining that. All the functions on there work okay. I haven't had this car long enough to really experiment, but don't expect iDrive levels of tech, but everything that I have needed has worked really well. The manual gear stick, well, you know how much I love my manuals, even if I do misshift an M2 on track once in a blue moon, but this one, well, there's no misshifting here. Wow, what a gearbox. And again, if you'd watched my first drive video, you would hear me raving about this box, and I can't wait to rave more about it once we get this car out on the open road. There's plenty of space in here. This car is wide, so I feel like I'm a long way away from the passenger seat. Plenty of legroom in the back, so it really is a practical car. It's not just a fast hot hatch, it's a seriously practical bit of kit. And yeah, I've really enjoyed the 4 or 5 days that I've had this, and I've used it for my daily duties. I think it's a brilliant, brilliant piece of kit. Right, let's get it out on the road and see what it's like to drive before the heavens open once again. Typically, the heavens have decided to open. I haven't really got much of an option but to run the cameras because I'm off on a plane to Brazil tomorrow, and later this afternoon isn't looking any better. But thankfully it's 20 degrees outside, it's fairly humid, and it appears that the rain hasn't started settling on the tarmac yet. So I figured, let's crack on. I'm not going to bother testing this car's claimed acceleration figures for a couple of reasons. First one, we've already talked about it, the weather. It's not going to have optimum grip out there. Lovely M140i. And secondly, because it's a manual and it has a very weird 3,500 RPM soft limiter. So that's whether you're in neutral and just revving it at a standstill, or whether you're trying to launch this car. And it's very hard to launch something hard with this much grip, even though it's front wheel drive. When you've only got 3,500 RPM, it seems to bog down. Tried it a couple of times off camera and I could smell clutch, so I just didn't want to destroy the clutch in this car trying to match their claim figures. But I'm in no doubt that it would do 5.4, 5.5 seconds in perfect conditions. But this car is not about drag times, it's not about straight line pace. Down here next to the gear stick we have various drive modes, including the top plus R mode. Before we talk about the other drive modes, I just want to caveat that when I road tested this car back in January around Thruxton in those torrential rainy conditions, I was in plus R mode. I didn't even know what that meant at the time, and I did experience a fair amount of understeer in this car compared to the old, or the older FK8. And now I know what plus R is. Essentially everything's stiffened up to the 11th degree. Well, it's no wonder that I was understeering more than I was in the FK8, which was set up a lot softer. I can't really see when you'd be in plus R, apart from maybe if you took this car out around Silverstone in perfectly dry conditions, but everywhere else you'd stay well clear of that mode. I've got mine set to individual, and in my individual mode, well, you can play around with the engine settings, essentially the throttle settings, steering, suspension, engine sound, rev match, the gauges as well. So there's a couple of different gauge or cluster options, but I've got most things backed off. The exhaust ramped up doesn't seem to make too much of a difference because we're in 2023 and it's cluttered up with OPF filters and all sorts of restrictors on it, but it doesn't sound bad. And I've got the throttle in plus R just to give me the best response and hopefully minimize any turbo lag. But everything else, the steering, the suspension, set to comfort, because the suspension, even in comfort in this car, I wouldn't say it's one of its weak points because it's not horrendous, but as you can probably see as we go over this slightly rough section of tarmac on one of my favorite roads, well, it's not exactly comfort as it's labeled up. But if you do ramp that up into sport or into plus R, I mean, your fillings are going to fall out through there. So it's livable for sure. And you've got to remind yourself that we're in a hot hatch, and therefore it's going to be a little bit sharp edged, but it could maybe be a little bit more comfortable if I was being really picky. But otherwise, yeah, it's a perfect setting for a typical UK road. Before we get on to how brilliant this car is, I want to talk about the one negative I've found whilst living with it for the past 4 or 5 days. And it's not that slightly overly stiff ride, because you can forgive it for that because of its amazing handling characteristics and its incredible driving dynamics. No, it's not the ride quality. It's actually a size issue. In the intro, I talked about how menacing and aggressive it looks in the front end, how wide and meaningful it looks. Looks like it should handle really well, which it does. Oh yes, it really does. But your eyes are not deceiving you. It looks wide on the outside because it is very, very wide. In fact, it's nearly 10 centimeters wider than the current M135i, and that's already quite a wide car. It's wider than a BMW 5 Series. It is wider than a BMW M4. Yeah, it's just madness. And I'm sure in places like America, maybe that isn't an issue. But as far as I'm concerned, one of the biggest draws to a hot hatch is the size of its footprint on a typical A or B road in the UK. And you see, when a hot hatch becomes wider than the majority of sports cars out there, and probably almost as wide as some supercars, well, it starts to lose some of its benefits along a road like this. You see, you end up using the whole lane, so you've kind of got nothing to play with. You can't move from the left to the right in the lane because there's literally about 2 inches to play with. And that to me is a real negative, and something that I didn't really realise or figure in the short time that I had behind that car in the press launch. And that's what's great about living with a car, even if it is 4 or 5 days, 6 days, you do start to learn and understand many positives, but you also figure out a few negatives. And I think that's a really important negative to talk about for someone that's looking at buying a hot hatch, because this is a brilliant car. It's no surprise that I absolutely love it, but something I have discovered is you have to be a little bit more reserved down some of your favorite roads, because it just takes up so much of the lane. It really, really does. It's the same width as my M3 Touring, and that car, well, I mean, that's a big old bus. So yeah, but that's my one, let's call it medium negative complaint. Let's get on to the good things. The good things start with that engine. It's absolutely mighty. And as we talked about, don't look at those acceleration figures to 60 miles an hour, because once you're going, it's so fast. Yes, there is a little bit of turbo lag in there, but you kind of work with it, and it definitely doesn't ruin the experience. It just feels like it's got plenty of go in pretty much all gears. When you're in 6th gear, it does rev slightly high at 70, 75 miles an hour. So I can't imagine it being the most efficient car on longer runs. Talking of efficiency, I've averaged about 30 in the time I've had this car, so that's pretty good. Although the fuel needle has gone down very quickly, so I'm guessing, I should have done my research, but I'm guessing it's got a fairly small fuel tank. But in terms of actual performance for efficiency, well, it gets a thumbs up from me. It doesn't seem to drink too much fuel. That engine, yeah, it's brilliant. Mated to this gearbox. Well, I raved about it in that first drive, and it's just epic. I wish that I could get my M2 manual gearbox once it's fixed to feel like this, because it's as good as they get. The clutch is just lovely weighted. The auto blip is amazing. I'm not even bothering with heel and toe. It's just brilliant. Oh, I absolutely love this car. I really, really do. Yes, it is a little bit big for the public road, but wow, it just rewards you. It gives you so much back. I wouldn't say it's oozing with steering feel, but there is some feel there. I know what's going on underneath the front axle. I can feel when it's struggling for grip. And talking about struggling for grip, I very rarely turn the traction control off in this car, and the reason I haven't done that is because when it's all on, it seems to work really well. It's not intrusive. If it breaks traction in first or second out of a slow hairpin, it seems to work really well and find that traction, whereas a lot of traction control devices just kill your power. This thing seems to give you plenty of momentum, and you don't really know what it's doing, if that makes sense. So it's a really good system. When you do turn it all off via this button down here, yes, maybe there's a little bit more driver involvement happening, and you do get a bit more wheel slip out of the slower corners, but I wouldn't say it's something that I reach down and deactivate straight away in this car. And that is something that I do turn off in the majority of modern cars these days, because it's always over intrusive for safety reasons, but in this car, on or off, it's just an absolute riot. The brakes are incredible, but when you use them reasonably hard, it triggers the hazard lights. And that's something that tends to happen on all modern cars, but usually when you're really sort of 70, 80, 90%, whereas in this car, when you're about 50%, they seem to trigger, and that does get slightly annoying. Maybe there is a way that you can deactivate that, because on a longer spirited drive, it would start to wind you up a bit. And on a track day, well, yeah, I wouldn't be able to deal with that happening in every single braking zone. I'm sure there is a way to deactivate it. I just don't know this car well enough. But in terms of the way they stop you, I mean, it's just mighty. We've got 265 section rubber all round, so it's a square tyre setup in this car, 19-inch, and they're PS4S's, so fantastic tyres, come rain or shine, as I've found out. It just feels really, really sure-footed. I'd love to see what someone like Swift or Suspension Secrets could do with the setup on this car, because I'm sure there's a lot to play with. It's probably in the default factory setting at the moment, but I'm sure playing around with a few of those settings would turn this into an absolute track weapon. Stick some Cut 2s on it and wow, it would be a fast car, especially on a dry circuit. Have I enjoyed revisiting the Civic Type R? Absolutely. It's a brilliant, brilliant piece of kit. I haven't wanted to put the keys down. Even when I've gone to bed, I've thought of excuses to go out for a little drive in it, because it is so brilliant. It gets right underneath the skin. I would say it has a similar effect and feeling to something like the brilliant 992 GT3 Touring that I had at the back end of last year. Yes, it's not as fast, it's not as well put together, doesn't quite give you that buzz that the GT3 Touring does, but it's a third of the price. And yes, almost £50,000 for a Honda Civic is absolute madness, especially when you consider something like the Hyundai i30N, which is surely one of this car's biggest competitors. Well, that's about 36 grand. So no idea how Honda were able to charge another 11 or 12 grand for this, but they did, and they all sold out. And you know what? I can see why, because, well, there's not many cars that offer this kind of driving feedback, especially that are on sale today, and there's pretty much no cars out there that give you a manual box as good as this. I genuinely think this is actually slightly better than the manual box in a GT4 or a GT3. It's that good. It feels so nice, and that's a massive, massive part of this car. Then you get into the handling. Just turn it in any speed. Look at that engine. You wouldn't think it was turbocharged by the way it revs out. Honda have done such a brilliant job of making it feel like it's NA once you get above 4.5, 5,000 RPM. Yes, it only revs to about 7,000, but that last 6 to 7 is really rewarding, and that doesn't normally happen in many turbocharged units. And yet down low you've got all that torque because it is turbocharged. So just everything in this car works. It's practical, as we talked about. It's a lovely big boot. You could get 4 adults in here, or 2 adults and a couple of kids that'd be very happy in the back seats there. It's just a really, really nice car. We're really going to miss cars like this moving forward. The future, as far as I'm concerned, is looking rather bleak and a little bit dull for us petrol heads that love cars that have soul, and this has so much soul. It really does. Such a fun little car. I think its biggest problem is how quickly it gobbles up slower moving traffic. It's just unreal, especially through the twisties. I think it's a good time to wrap up the video. Also, the fuel light has just come on, so I need to go and find a petrol station and go home and start packing for Brazil. Hopefully we're going to have better weather out there than we are currently having in the UK. Big shout out and thanks to Honda for sending me this. Brilliant, brilliant car. It's almost pointless that they have Civic Type R's as press cars because you can't go and buy a new one, but I think they're fully aware of how brilliant this car is, and it's only mostly going to get positive press when it's sent out to the likes of me. Really is a great bit of kit. I've probably said that 1,000 times in this video. I think if I could have the ultimate sort of 10 car garage, unlimited budget, I would definitely have one of these in there, and it would probably replace something like a Cayman GT4. I'd have this, and then my next sort of fun track sports car would be something like a GT3 RS. I think those two would sort of complement each other really well. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. I'm glad that the weather hasn't completely ruined it. It's certainly 10 times better than it was back in January, but it seems that me in this car attract a little bit of rainfall. I'll see you at another video very soon. Cheers.